I'm going to move on now into sort of today's energy market and characteristics, okay? So if you guys want to jump in or ask any questions, feel free. But there's a lot of things going on. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have a frugal version that you're doing for developing countries?
You have a what?
Do you have a frugal version that you're doing for developing countries, or do you have, is it a one size fits all?
No, we have different kind of models. For example, we do have actually we've operated about a 100-person development team out of Noida in the Delhi area, and we have a business in India that's quite strong. We have a joint venture in China, and so we are addressing those markets with special pricing and frugal versions, as well. And then we've also had a very strong presence in Brazil. So, I would say those are probably the three dominant countries that we have that I would say impact our pricing models as well as our deployment strategies, but also have a very great need in terms of what they're trying to do in their countries. Okay. So challenges today, there's a lot of them. There's actually an update. This slide is talking about the Clean Energy and the Standard Act of 2012, but recently you've probably read about the Clean Power Plan, or you've heard about that. That's one of the Obama administration's clean initiatives that is essentially passed, and now utilities are all facing some significant emission reduction programs that they have to put in place. Those are going to increase further the cost of using coal burning plants, which will then cause more plants to go offline and convert them. That will raise some questions about power system reliability, because if someone says, I can't afford to operate this plant, oh, and by the way, I'm not going to build a new one, what are we going to do, right? So that's where some of the initiatives are. Look at distributed generation, look at renewables, and look at converting coal plants to natural gas. There's some talk about nuclear, but frankly, that's a long time prospect and unlikely to have a significant impact in the next 20 years. But in any case, we have a lot of those things going on. They're all driven by greenhouse gas emissions, and I think we all understand what's going on with that. But we also have aging infrastructure. A lot of the power systems that have been put in place are getting older, right? And there's a lot of people who are just not going into that business, so the people are getting older too. So there's old people, there's old infrastructure, they're facing new cost pressures, right? And those new cost pressures are also being further exacerbated by the need to actually accommodate these new sources of energy from wind and from solar, all of which have high variation, right? So they're very difficult to manage and control. And that increases the risks and costs of operating the power system. You throw on top of that my new Model X, which is going to draw a little bit of power when I plug it into charge, and all of a sudden, you can see that there are some interesting dynamics here in the business. So lots of these sorts of challenges. Some of these challenges are being helped, and some are being created through technology innovation. So technology innovation in terms of being able to manage my load through something like a Nest thermostat that automatically can respond when a power system says, hey, I need you to reduce your usage. The Nest thermostat could say, okay, I'm going to turn your temperature set point a little bit, so I'm not going to run your AC quite so much, right? And that will drop your home's load. You do that across 1 million homes, it makes a meaningful difference, right? Other types of information systems, give you that kind of information as a mobile device, or they gamify some of these things where you say you reduce your use and you'll get some savings, and we can now interact with the consumer to try to get this demand response, they call it, in cases where the grid is particularly stressed or where power prices are particularly high. So they're offering you incentives. Part of that will also go into the innovations around solar, and more, probably not more importantly, but more dynamic right now, or let's say more dramatic in the way it affects the grid, is the use of power storage, right? Remember what I was talking about when you turn that light on, right? That generator has to immediately react. It really does, right? Now, when you put storage into the system, all of a sudden that changes that dynamic, and that has a big impact on how we actually can operate the grid. It can really promote increased reliability, and there are a lot of really interesting things about what's going on in batteries. And of course, all know about Tesla, and Tesla's driving the cost of batteries down, in terms of the way that people are looking at it. But today, you can actually get batteries from Panasonic, one of the leading suppliers, that are competing with Tesla, and actually at rates that are quite low compared to what we've seen in the past. Literally half of what they used to be as little as a couple of years ago. So the combination of new generation, whether it's from natural gas, from solar, from wind, storage, and then ways to manage demand at the customer site are all sort of changing the dynamic and putting the customer into the loop. So the consumer, right, is now becoming part of the operational characteristic of the power system. And that's really an important dynamic that has really goes back to why we said, well, we need to have a meter in this overall system. So the options that I have today, if I look at this is a chart of my own home using power here just a few days ago, and I'm on our time of use rate in San Diego, right? So during those darker bar areas in the middle of the day, I actually pay 36 cents a kilowatt hour, right? But I get a deal because the average price is closer to 15 cents per kilowatt hour, 20 cents per kilowatt hour. I get a deal of 9 cents a kilowatt hour in the off peak. So when I use power outside that peak window, I get a pretty significant discount, but I get a big penalty using it on peak. And so what that's prompted people to do is to look at the decline in battery cost in particular, right, which are basically, projected to be, again, halved by 2020, and allow me, I'll just look at that animation, I'm going to shift that dark bar usage, right, to a period where I'll charge a battery to cover that, so that during the on-peak time, I won't have to actually consume any power during the on-peak time. That means that I basically save 27 cents per kilowatt hour that's in that dark section, right? Now what that does is that sort of ends up netting me some money that I can use to pay off the investment in putting that battery in place. Now if on top of that, that battery can help me provide some kind of power system reliability, where if I have a short outage, I can ride through that outage with an uninterruptible power supply here at my home, then I get the additional benefit of reliability. And on top of that, if I look at my home usage today, it's about 36 kilowatt hours per day, right? So that's not too bad, and I can actually cover that and be net zero with about a $24,000 investment in solar panels. So if I couple that with my battery and so forth, I have a pretty nice package. And I guess many of you are probably familiar with this concept, but what this is doing is it's offering me a way to get lower costs of energy, generating it myself, more reliable power. Now the interesting thing is, let me add one more thing here. I forgot about this piece. One more twist. Natural gas, when you burn it, can convert into energy, of course. And if we do the equation between how much gas we burn to kilowatt hours, so I can equate it to electricity, I'm actually paying quite a bit less, right? 5 times, 6 times less for a kilowatt hour from my gas than I am from my electricity. So if I looked and I say, wait, can I generate electricity using natural gas? Well, of course I can. I can do it from a big power plant, but I can also do it now with more and smaller scale systems as well. So folks like Bloom Energy have been building fuel cells for a long time. Today they power buildings like this with their fuel cells. But with this kind of electric gas price difference, there's an arbitrage possibility that I as a consumer could generate my own electricity, not only from solar, but also from clean burning natural gas. Still carbon emissions, but far, far less, and without the distribution and transmission losses that come from a big central station power plant. So the efficiencies of doing this are now approaching the same efficiency as the power plant. So now there's almost no reason other than the scaled down economics to say whether this could actually work. Technically it can. Commercially, probably not quite there yet. All this means we have questions today about what happens to that infrastructure that we built to transmit power from central stations to consumers. And the questions there are, do we really need it? How are we going to continue to support it? It's getting older. As I said, the people are getting older. There's emission limits causing the power plants to come off. Reliability issues. If you remember Hurricane Sandy, that's stimulated a lot of investment in system reliability. And then, of course, on the other side of the equation, all the costs are coming down in terms of these alternative distributed resourcing capabilities. So we are in this real conundrum right now in our industry to say, how is this going to go forward? What is the role of the wires company in terms of distributing energy around the grid?